Old paper, faded ink, and familiar handwriting. The moment he saw it, his hands started trembling. This was the letter he'd been waiting for 45 years. But the sender was no longer alive. The final words inside would reveal a secret the townspeople had never known. Robert Bob Johnson had been serving as Clearwater's postmaster for 23 years. 68 years old, medium height, gray hair, and always neatly dressed. The townspeople loved him. Cheerful, patient, always ready to help. As the sole employee at the post office, he processed hundreds of letters, packages, and documents daily. But nobody noticed why he examined every letter so carefully, why he focused so intently on handwritings. Over the years, thousands of letters had passed through his hands, but none had brought back old memories like this one. That handwriting was a voice from the past he'd tried to forget, and today, that voice had finally reached him. Hello and welcome to The Last Stand. Have you ever received a letter that changed your life? Share your experiences in the comments. We share stories daily, so don't forget to subscribe. Bob had arrived at the post office early that morning, as always. Clearwater was a small town, 2,300 residents, shops lined along the main street, one church, one school. Everyone knew each other. Bob was born and raised here, returned after military service, and had been working as postmaster for 23 years. His office was small but organized. An old wooden desk, mailboxes on the walls, an old radio in the corner. That radio was special to Bob. Every morning he'd turn it on and listen to AM frequencies. Nobody knew the reason for this habit. That morning, while sorting mail, his hand stopped at an envelope. Thick paper, old-fashioned envelope, handwritten address. But the return address made his blood run cold. Seattle, Washington. And he recognized that handwriting. His hands began to tremble. After 45 years, a letter had come from Charlie. Bob took a deep breath before opening the envelope. The letter inside was short but heartbreaking. Dear Bob, if you're reading this, I'm no longer among you. Doctors said 6 months, but I know it'll be less. I wanted to write while I still had the strength. I've thought about that night every day for 45 years. On the USS Hornet, in the South China Sea, that stormy night. You were the radio operator. I was working in the engine room. I remember everything that happened that night. Bob, you saved my life. Not just that night, but afterwards too. I never forgot what you did for the Wilson family. What those kids think about their father was made possible by you. But Bob, I'm leaving now, and I don't want to take this secret to my grave. Maybe someday the truth should be known. Maybe it shouldn't. I'm leaving that decision to you, brother. You're a real hero. Even if nobody knows it, I never forgot you. Charles Charlie Matthews, USS Hornet, radio operator 1978, 1979. After finishing the letter, Bob remained motionless for a long time, his eyes filled with tears. Charlie, his old radio operator buddy. The only witness to that terrible night. Bob carefully folded the letter and put it in the bottom drawer of his desk. Nobody would see it. Charlie was dead. The secret would stay with him. But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, David Wilson came to the post office. Clearwater's grocery store owner, 45 years old, looked very much like his father, Wilson. He had a folder in his hand and was excited. Mr. Johnson, my father's death anniversary is coming up. I want to organize a special memorial ceremony this year. Got permission from the city council. We're putting up a bust in the town square. Even old Navy officers are coming. Bob's heart sank. A bust? Yes, David continued. Everything's organized. The bust is ready. Invitations sent out. 200 people are coming. But I needed my father's military records for this. I applied to Navy Archives. David stopped and looked at Bob. There was a strange expression on his face. Mr. Johnson, the documents from Navy Archives are very odd. There are major inconsistencies in my father's records. Bob's breath caught, but he tried to appear calm. What kind of inconsistencies? David opened his folder. Look, my father's death report says he fought bravely as a radio operator that night. But in the same ship records, there's another radio operator. Someone named Robert Johnson. Bob froze. David continued. Is there any chance this Robert Johnson could be you? Because in the crew photo we got from archives, there's someone who looks a lot like you. David pulled out an old black and white photograph, taken on the deck of USS Hornet. Bob immediately recognized himself. He was young, in uniform, radio operator insignia shining on his chest. David looked at him. "Is this you?" Bob couldn't speak. After a long silence, he said, "Yes." David jumped to his feet. "You served on the same ship as my father? Why did you hide this for 45 years? Bob helplessly raised his hands. "David, calm down, I can explain." "Then explain." David's voice was rising. "Why did you change my father's story? What really happened that night?" Bob took a deep breath. "David, your father." "My father what?" David asked sharply. "Your father was a good kid, but he got very scared that night. He made a mistake. Because of that mistake, the ship almost sank and 3 people died." David's face turned bright red. "You're lying." "My father was a hero. I made him look like a hero in the report, David. But the truth was different." "Why? Why would you do such a thing?" "Because I didn't want your family to be ashamed. You were only 5 years old. Your mother was a young widow. I wanted to protect you." David angrily pounded the desk. "Was that up to you? We lived with lies for 30 years. "There's a lie written on my father's gravestone," Bob answered painfully. "I'm sorry, David. I thought it was right at the time." As David was leaving, he turned around. "The memorial ceremony is tomorrow. 200 people are coming. Navy officers are coming." "What am I supposed to tell them?" Bob couldn't answer. David slammed the door as he left. That night, Bob couldn't sleep. David's anger was justified. They had lived with a lie for 45 years, but his intention back then was good. What would have happened if the Wilson family had learned the truth? The next morning, preparations for the memorial ceremony had begun. Clearwater Square was decorated with flags. Wilson's bust was covered with a white cloth. 200 chairs were arranged. Bob didn't want to leave home, but despite David's anger, he had to attend the ceremony. The town was too small. His absence would be noticed. When the ceremony began, the square was packed. The Wilson family, city council, neighbors, and in the front row, 2 officers from the Navy, Commander Richard Hayes and Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell. The mayor gave the opening speech. Then it was David's turn. When he stepped onto the stage, his face was tense. Bob watched him anxiously. David stepped up to the microphone and remained silent for a long time. The crowd waited. David closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he began to speak. "Friends, we're here for my father, Robert Wilson. Last night I thought a lot. I learned my father's real story." There was slight movement in the square. Bob's heart was pounding. David continued, "My father served on USS Hornet. But the story that's been told doesn't reflect the truth. There was a terrible storm that night. My father was a young sailor. He got very scared. He panicked and made a mistake. This mistake led to the death of 3 sailors. A shockwave spread through the square. Some people stood up. But," David continued, "there's a real hero in this story. That person has been living among us for 45 years and we didn't know." David pointed to Bob. "Bob Johnson, our postmaster. He was the one who saved everyone on the ship that night. As radio operator, he sent the Mayday signal, repaired navigation, organized the survivors." Bob watched David in amazement. David continued with tears in his eyes. "Then he hid my father's mistakes in the report, made him look like a hero. He carried this secret for 45 years and never boasted. So our family wouldn't be ashamed." Bob stood up to try to stop David, but David continued his speech. "Bob Johnson is a hero in the true sense, not just that night, but afterwards too. A man who showed mercy, forgave, made sacrifices." David stopped and turned to Bob. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for being angry with you. You did the right thing. You protected us. This town should know who you are." Everyone in the square stood up and began applauding Bob. Bob looked around with emotional eyes. The truth had come out at a moment he never expected. Commander Hayes stood up. "Mr. Johnson, I read the real report of that night in Navy archives. The operation you performed is taught as case analysis at military academies. It's an honor to serve with you." Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell added, "Sir, the mercy you showed to the Wilson family is the greatest virtue a soldier can have. You are a true officer and gentleman." Both officers gave Bob a formal salute. The entire square was applauding on their feet. Pastor Franklin stepped forward. "Bob, you're a true Christian gentleman. Covering someone else's mistakes is what God asks of us." Bob humbly replied, "I just did my duty. Robert was a good kid. He was just scared. Everyone makes mistakes." David came down from the stage and went to Bob's side. He hugged him. "Forgive me, Mr. Johnson. You protected us for 30 years, and I got angry at you. I'm ashamed." Bob squeezed his shoulder. "You were right, David. You had the right to know the truth." Commander Hayes approached Bob. "Mr. Johnson, I want to make you an official offer. The Navy knows your story. We're inviting you to Washington for a delayed recognition ceremony." Bob was surprised. "That's not necessary, Commander." Hayes insisted. "Sir, even though it's 45 years late, the Navy wants to recognize your service." From that day on, Bob's life changed in Clearwater, but he remained the same. Still the same humble, helpful man. But now the town knew him for who he really was. David invited Bob to dinner with his family. "Mr. Johnson, you're our real hero, and thank you for forgiving my father." Bob smiled. "Your father was a good man, David. He was just young and scared." 2 weeks later, Bob went to Washington. At the ceremony held at Navy headquarters, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. Commander Hayes said at the ceremony, "Petty Officer Johnson, even though it's 30 years late, the Navy recognizes your extraordinary heroism. The operation you performed that night, and the character you showed afterwards, is an example to all sailors." When Bob received the medal, he thought of Charlie. His closest friend couldn't see him, but his spirit was there. When he returned to Clearwater, the town welcomed him like a hero. But Bob was still the same Bob. Every morning he went to the post office, listened to his radio, delivered mail. Only now he wasn't searching for Charlie's voice on the radio, because he knew his best friend was finally at peace. Bob Johnson's story ends here. But real heroes' stories never end, because they continue showing mercy every day, quietly. Have you met someone in your life who covered someone's mistakes, gave them a second chance? Maybe you're such a hero in someone's life. Share with us in the comments. Thank you for joining the Last Stand family. We share stories daily, so don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. We'll be here again tomorrow with another hero's story. Take care of yourselves and remember, real strength is showing mercy.